Jan Steen remains one of the most captivating and richly expressive painters of the Dutch Golden Age. Renowned for his genre scenes brimming with humor, chaos, and moral commentary, Steen created a body of work that mirrored the social fabric of 17th century Dutch life in all its complexity. His paintings are characterized by vibrant narratives, a theatrical sense of character, and a shrewd, often satirical, observation of human behavior. Born around 1626 in the city of Leiden, Jan van Steen came from a well-established Catholic family. His father was a successful brewer, owning a tavern called de Slang, the Snake, and the family was part of the small but active Catholic community in a predominantly Protestant city. This background would later influence not only Steen's business ventures, but also the rich subject matter of his art, which often revolved around tavern life, domestic scenes, and communal festivity. Steen's early education remains somewhat obscure, but historical records indicate that he enrolled at the University of Leiden in 1646. Though he registered as a student, there is no strong evidence that he pursued academic studies with much dedication. The university connection may have provided him with exposure to humanist thought and the vibrant intellectual culture of the time, but his real passion was painting. Around this period, Steen likely began formal artistic training. Though the details of Steen's apprenticeship are still debated, art historians believe he studied under several prominent artists, including the German painter Nicolaus Knupfer in Utrecht. Knupfer was known for his historical and biblical scenes, and his narrative clarity and expressive figures would have made a strong impression on the young Steen. Some sources also suggest that Steen may have studied with Jan van Goyen, a landscape painter and father of Steen's future wife. Van Goyen's influence is particularly evident in Steen's early works, where one can observe a similar tonal palette and compositional structure. By 1648, Jan Steen had become a founding member of the Leiden Guild of St. Luke, which signaled his professional recognition as an independent artist. This was a pivotal moment in his career, as it marked his entry into the competitive world of Dutch art during its golden age, a period characterized by a booming art market, a burgeoning middle class, and increasing demand for genre paintings that reflected daily life. In 1649, Steen married Margriet van Goyen, the daughter of his presumed mentor, Jan van Goyen. The marriage brought him into closer contact with The Hague, where Van Goyen was based. This connection opened new opportunities and likely led to Steen's temporary relocation to The Hague in the early 1650s. The couple would eventually have a large family. Jan Steen is believed to have fathered at least 8 children, several of whom appear in his paintings. Around 1654, Steen moved to Delft, where he operated a brewery called de Slang, possibly named in homage to his father's establishment. Despite his efforts, the brewery venture proved unsuccessful. Nevertheless, Steen continued to paint during this time and maintained ties with the local artist community. His business failure did not diminish his artistic output. If anything, it added a layer of personal experience to the boisterous, chaotic domestic scenes for which he became famous. Following the brewery's failure, Steen relocated again, this time to Warmond, a small village near Leiden, where he lived between roughly 1656 and 1660. It was here that his mature style began to take shape. Drawing from the theatricality of life and the visual abundance of daily routines, Steen developed a uniquely narrative approach to genre painting. He delighted in portraying both the joys and the follies of humanity, often incorporating humorous or didactic elements into his compositions. His Catholic upbringing may have played a role in his comfort with the sensuality and moral ambiguity that permeate much of his work, traits that set him apart from more austere Protestant contemporaries. By the early 1660s, Steen was living in Harlem, where he remained for nearly a decade and produced some of his most ambitious and accomplished works. The move to Harlem placed him among a community of esteemed artists, including Frans Hals and Jacob van Ruysdael. Harlem was a thriving artistic center, and Steen's reputation grew during this period as he refined his theatrical style and deepened his engagement with themes of morality, education, and social order. By the early 1660s, Jan Steen had become an established figure in the flourishing Dutch art scene. His move to Harlem marked a period of prolific activity, during which he refined the theatrical energy, rich color palette, and crowded compositions that became his signature. Steen's paintings from this decade are widely regarded as some of the finest examples of Dutch genre art, filled with lively domestic interiors, peasant revelries, schoolrooms, and inns. Though humorous on the surface, these works carried implicit moral messages, often pointing to the dangers of gluttony, sloth, lust, and folly, all framed with wit and a humanizing touch. Despite his success, Steen's financial situation remained precarious for much of his life. Like many artists of the Dutch Golden Age, he was subject to the fluctuations of the art market and often struggled to make a consistent living solely from painting. To supplement his income, he undertook various side ventures. His earlier attempt to run a brewery had failed, and even in Harlem, where the demand for art was relatively high, his income was likely unstable. This struggle did not seem to dampen his creative spirit, and he continued to produce paintings that combined artistic sophistication with a sharp understanding of human behavior. Steen's works frequently explored the themes of domestic disorder and social satire. His depictions of chaotic households, drunken festivities, and unruly children weren't simply caricatures. They were reflective of the complexities of real life in the Dutch Republic. His characters, whether misbehaving or virtuous, were rendered with a humanity that made them deeply relatable. Unlike some of his contemporaries who leaned heavily on idealization or formal restraint, Steen embraced imperfection and imbued it with dignity and humor. Around 1670, following the death of his wife Margriet van Goyen, Steen moved back to his native Leiden. Her passing marked a difficult chapter in his life, both emotionally and economically. Left to care for several children, Steen returned to his family home and began to shift his focus toward the local art market. The art scene in Leiden had changed significantly since his youth, but Steen adapted by rejoining the Leiden Guild of St. Luke in 1673, eventually serving as its dean. This return to leadership in the guild marked a full-circle moment in his career and reaffirmed his position in the artistic community. During the 1670s, Steen continued to produce a remarkable volume of work, even as the Dutch Republic faced economic decline and military conflict. The rampjaar, disaster year of 1672, had a major impact on the Dutch economy and disrupted the lives of many artists. Commissions became scarcer, and patrons tightened their purse strings. Yet Steen remained productive, often painting on a smaller scale to meet the changing demands of buyers. His compositions from this final period retained their charm, complexity, and insightful humor. Throughout his life, Steen was known for including himself and his family in his paintings, not as vanity, but as a clever way to bridge the gap between art and everyday life. These self-representations often poked fun at his own persona, a painter, innkeeper, and observer of social mischief. He blurred the line between artist and participant, making the viewer acutely aware of their own role in the moral theatre he portrayed. This self-awareness, paired with his skillful technique, made Steen's works distinct among his peers. Stylistically, Steen was extraordinarily versatile. He combined the influences of his mentors, Nicolaus Knupfer's narrative clarity and Jan van Goyen's tonal harmonies, with his own vivid imagination. He was also influenced by theatrical performance and Dutch literature, particularly the comedic plays of the period, which is evident in the way his paintings unfold like staged dramas. His use of expressive faces, rich fabrics, and layered symbolism testifies to his mastery of both composition and commentary. Jan Steen died in 1679 at the age of approximately 53, leaving behind a legacy that was not fully appreciated until generations later. At the time of his death, his work had begun to fall slightly out of fashion, as tastes shifted toward more restrained or classical modes of painting. Yet his influence endured through his prolific output and the universality of his themes. He is believed to have created over 800 paintings, of which roughly 350 are known today. In the centuries following his death, Steen's reputation grew considerably. Art historians and collectors came to recognize the depth of his narrative talent and the richness of his social commentary. In the 18th and 19th centuries, he was increasingly viewed not just as a comic painter, but as a moralist and a cultural chronicler. Museums across Europe began acquiring his works, and scholars began to study his paintings for their insight into Dutch society, family life, and cultural values. Today, Jan Steen is celebrated as one of the most original voices of the Dutch Golden Age. His legacy lies not in grandiose religious or mythological canvases, but in his vivid portrayals of ordinary people navigating the messiness of life.